I want to invite you into my kitchen today for a day of cooking in the farmhouse. So we started this morning with some sourdough, einkorn, spelt English muffins. Last night before going to bed, I didn't get any footage of this unfortunately, but I added a cup of sourdough starter to 4 cups of flour. Now last night I did half einkorn and half spelt, and then I added a cup and a half of water. Now whenever you are doing an einkorn flour in place of a recipe that otherwise called for all-purpose, you need to reduce down the water, otherwise it just won't set up properly because the einkorn just absorbs less of the water. It just needs less water. This morning I added 2 teaspoons of baking soda, 2 teaspoons of salt, a couple tablespoons of honey, and cooked them in my cast iron skillets. Now if you want a full recipe for this, it's over on the blog, farmhouseonthemoon.com. It is just for regular wheat flour, so whether you use whole grain or all-purpose, the recipe works for that. If you're going to do einkorn, just reduce the liquid a bit. I also fried up a couple eggs. We served it with eggs and jam. Some kids wanted the egg sandwich, some wanted jam, some had a little bit of each. That's what I did as well. Now the next task for the day is rendering lard from pork fat. So I am currently in the process of using up all the last of the meat in my freezer because I just got a big order from my sister who just raised her first pastured pork. So she recently harvested that. My dad went elk hunting, so I needed to fit everything into my freezer. So I moved all of the items that were old that need to be used up to the top shelf, and then I filled the rest of the freezer with new meat. One of the things I had on the top shelf, in addition to my chicken necks and backs and feet, which I talked to you about in my What We Eat in a Week video, if you want to know more info on what I did with that, I also had a big old package of pork fat from Fed from the Farm. I bought this so that I could render lard. Now you might have some negative thoughts in your head about lard, and the reason for that is because if you buy lard from pigs that weren't raised in a way like my sister raised hers or Fed from the Farm raises theirs, then a lot of what makes the non-organic pastured pork bad for you is concentrated in the fat. Traditionally, pork fat and lard have been used, and it actually is really quite healthy. We have been, I don't want to say tricked, but tricked by modern marketing to believe that certain vegetable oils are better. They are simply not. Fats like butter and lard are actually quite healthy. And so it's good that you can use them in this way, because when you buy a whole animal, like I was talking about with the chicken feet video and the broth I make from that, you don't want these things to go to waste. Traditional cultures use the entire animal. And so this is actually a really healthy part that we a lot of times just throw away. So you can usually get it really cheap from a local farm because unless somebody's gonna render lard, it's pretty much useless. So to make it, I just took my big old container of pork fat and cut it into 1-inch pieces-ish and put it in a cast iron Dutch oven. It has been going on low all morning, so it is now afternoon. And it's starting to release the fat. Now you don't want to cook it really fast. That is how, like when you cook bacon and you strain off the fat, you are rendering pork fat there, but because you cooked the bacon at such a high temperature, it definitely has its own bacony flavor. If you want a more mild flavor, something that you can put in biscuits or a crust, say like a pie crust for a chicken pot pie, you're going to want to cook it a lot more slowly. It's actually surprisingly shelf stable when you strain off the other, like the solid parts, and you have just fat. But let me show you what we have here. I'm definitely gonna let it go longer. A bit high at this point, so I'm gonna turn it down a bit. But a slow cooker is also a really good way to do this if you don't want it sitting on your stove all day at a really low temp. But you can see it's starting to release all this fat. We're just gonna keep going until it is all nicely released. And then once we strain it off, it'll just be a nice white fat. Now, another thing you can do is you can cook it in a slow cooker. So you can just put it in your crock pot, let it sit all day. I don't have one. I also thought about putting it in the Instant Pot on the warm function. That would work as well. I opted just to do the cast iron Dutch oven because it really retains the heat nicely and it'll just cook slowly all day long. Now for lunch today, I made some einkorn sourdough fried chicken. To do this, last night I fed my sourdough starter with a whole bunch of einkorn. I had some of you in my video where I showed you a week in the life of my sourdough starter, or 2 weeks in the life, that I feed it with unbleached all-purpose. I don't always do that. I got a huge amount of just barely expired, unbleached, all-purpose organic flour for $8, so I was in the process of just using it up. Normally, I swap my flours out a lot more. I'll go from einkorn to whole grain. I will use unbleached all-purpose some too, but we do like to use a variety of grains, and I prefer to use einkorn more than anything else. Now we're getting really low on that. I'm down to like 1 bag, so I don't feel this sense of urgency to go through all of the almost expired flour. And so last night I fed my starter with einkorn flour. Bubbled up all the same, and I will probably do that until, I don't know, for the foreseeable future. And then I made a little flour mixture of einkorn flour, salt, and garlic powder, and then a liquid mixture of sourdough starter, milk, 1 egg, and I combined that. Put the chicken in the einkorn flour, and then into the starter mixture, then back in the flour, and then fried it in coconut oil. Turned out delicious. I'm thinking about putting this recipe in some fashion on the blog. I need to actually measure. The one mistake I made, which I do this a lot when I make fried things, is I didn't add enough salt to the flour mixture. You definitely want to do that. That is what gives a lot of the flavor. Also, it'd be really delicious once I have my lard to fry it in lard. I think that would even taste better. Today I just fried it in coconut oil. Now after I cooked all the fried chicken, there's always a few little bits left in the oil, but you don't want to throw the oil away. So I strained the oil and then I added it back to my skillet and cooked the potatoes for lunch in that. I also steamed some broccoli on the back of the stove and then served the chicken with the potatoes, the broccoli, and the sauerkraut. If you've never made sauerkraut, I do have a video on that. I also have made it many times on my YouTube channel. Essentially, it's salt plus cabbage. So easy. I also like to add caraway seeds to mine when I can. It makes it so much more delicious. But I will leave my tutorial down in the description box below. Now for dinner, we are going to make some of the elk that my dad recently hunted for. He went on a hunting trip and he got an elk, and it is such a delicious meat. I'm just gonna make a simple chili. Now, I should have thought ahead and soaked my beans and cooked them, but I did not think ahead. So I have some canned black beans. I'm just going to do my elk meat, some diced onion and garlic. I'm gonna add some canned tomatoes, canned beans, and then I'm gonna cook up a box of my einkorn pasta. My favorite way to make chili is always chili mac, or chili with some kind of pasta. Not necessarily macaroni in this case. But it really makes it go a long way, so we can end up eating on the same big pot of soup for a couple of meals. I'll also add some shredded cheese as well as sour cream. If my avocados are ripe, I think I have a few ripe ones, we'll top it with diced avocado, maybe even a little sauerkraut. This really just helps to stretch it out so that I don't have to cook again. Alright, well thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you got some inspiration for cooking in your kitchen, in a traditional way, which is the kind of stuff that I just really love. As always, if you are brand new, hit that subscribe button. I make 2 new videos every week on food from scratch, natural living, in a handmade home. Thank you so much for stopping by the farmhouse.